Welcome to Inside Politics. I'm John King. Thank you for sharing this busy news day with us. Elizabeth Warren faces an early 2020 campaign crisis. She listed her race as an American Indian when she registered to practice law in Texas more than 30 years ago. Plus, new CNN reporting and new CNN poll numbers this hour on Joe Biden in 2020. These things rarely end as they begin, but the early numbers may prove hard for the former vice president to ignore. And the State of the Union is still divided. The president's big speech did include a few bipartisan olive branches, but his tone on immigration, investigations, and the direction of the Democrats is driving the morning after debate.
We are alarmed by the new calls to adopt socialism in our country. America was founded on liberty and independence, and not government coercion, domination, and control. We are born free, and we will stay free. Tonight, we renew our resolve that America will never be a socialist country.
And we begin the hour right there with the President's State of the Union. Bipartisan wishes overshadowed by partisan thumps. And on the biggest pressing question, no guarantees the government won't shut down again in just 10 days. The big annual stage is a chance for the president to offer us a roadmap. But look and listen for some clear direction on how to resolve the border wall dispute and avoid another government shutdown.
Now is the time for Congress to show the world that America is committed to ending illegal immigration. In the past, most of the people in this room voted for a wall. But the proper wall never got built. I will get it built. Simply put, walls work and walls save lives. So let's work together, compromise, and reach a deal that will truly make America safe.
Now, if you're an optimist, you did hear the president right there say the word compromise. But nowhere in the 82-minute speech did the president hint where or how he would budge off his wall demand. The top Democrat in the Senate today sounding sour on the odds of a deal to stave off a shutdown. And listen here, the vice president warning more stalemate could well be on the horizon.
Can you guarantee there will not be another government shutdown?
Well, I think our hope is that there's not, but I can't make that guarantee, Jeff.
CNN Sunland Safradi live on Capitol Hill. Sunland, on the day after, President offered what many don't see as a way out. Up there, the aides yesterday said hopeful negotiations might find a path forward. They still feel that way?
Well, the negotiators, John, are essentially trying in earnest to look the other way. They're trying to keep their heads down, keep hammering out a deal, keep trying to hammer out a deal, I should say, and essentially try not to let the president's rhetoric and his words derail them in any way. And the feeling up here on Capitol Hill between Democrats and Republicans, notably, is that the more that President Trump stays out of these negotiations, the better shot that they have at actually getting something. And that is in part why we've seen something of a different posture coming from many aides and negotiators up here on Capitol Hill. You have, at the time, President Trump kind of splashing cold water on the work of the conference committee. You have the negotiators saying something of rosy language, saying that they are indeed making progress, that they're inching potentially towards a deal, and basically giving us glimmers of hope that they could potentially broker a deal, potentially as soon as the end of this week. And the conference committee this morning, they are at this moment continuing to meet. They've been meeting for over 2 hours this morning. They had a classified briefing on the border wall. Of course, that is the thorniest issue. And Senator Durbin, emerging from that meeting just moments ago, the Democratic senator, was asked if anything he heard in that briefing leads him to believe that they're any closer to agreement. In one word, John, he just said no. So stay tuned as this all continues.
We'll see, and even if they do come up with a deal, then they've got to convince the president to sign it. But Sunland, appreciate the reporting live from the Hill. With me in studio to share their reporting and their insights, Julie Pace with the Associated Press, CNN's Jeff Zeleny, Tola Olorunipa with Bloomberg, and Julie Hirschfeld Davis with the New York Times. The big question in town this morning is, was there a hidden clue there as how to get out of this? And I guess the bigger question is, was this a 2019 governing speech or a 2020 campaign marker?
It was a 2020 launch. He's seeing all these other Democrats do it, so that's exactly what he was doing in the House chamber. It was clear by immigration, obviously, but the socialism language and other things. He was, I think, trying to get Republicans back on his side, into the idea of he is their standard bearer, it is his party. So the speech was a lot of different things, but it was centrally, to my ear at least, and to a lot of people I talked to after the speech, the opening bell for his re-election campaign.
I think Jeff's right on one important point there, that a lot of what Trump was trying to do was actually shore up some of his support among Republicans.
Right.
You know, he has the support of Republican voters writ large. But there has been some signs of weakening among his support among Republicans on Capitol Hill, in part because the shutdown went so poorly for them. And what I think was interesting about his rhetoric around immigration, the border wall, and the possibility of a future shutdown is that, well, he was very clear he wants to build this wall. He sees that as a central promise. He didn't mention his pledge to use an emergency declaration if Congress doesn't give him a deal, and he didn't use the wall as an ultimatum. He said he would build it, but there was no bright line on what he would or would not sign.
I thought what he did not say about immigration and the wall was as interesting as what he did, because, as Sunlen said, I think this conference committee really is hoping that the president will stay quiet, will stay on the sidelines, will let them broker this deal if there's a deal to be brokered. And the fact that he didn't try to put some more meat on the bones of what that compromise would look like, and he didn't make an ultimatum, and he did use the word compromise, at least leaves them the space to potentially reach that deal. But there's still the overriding question, which he didn't do one thing to answer last night, about whether he will ultimately be able to accept that deal when they present it to him, if they're even able to get there inside the written.
Yeah, will he back down? Which is why you hear the negotiators, normally in Washington, the deadline is a week from Friday. Normally in Washington, that means they would go till a week from Friday, probably until the sun was starting to set. That's normally the way they work. Maybe if they have a late flight, they try to get done early afternoon. But there's some talk of trying to get it done this Friday. The reason for that being in part, give the president some time to think it over, to see what happens, to avoid another crisis at the end. Listen to the top two Democrats today saying, we hope, Mr. President, you'll A, give us a chance to finish this, and then B, maybe listen, sign it.
Left to their own devices, I think they can have an agreement on time by Friday.
You heard his speech. You said, uh-oh. But if the president stays out of it, I am confident that the Democrats and Republicans, House and Senate, can come up with an agreement.
How confident are you that the president can stay out of it?
I don't know. I mean, he can't help himself.
I mean, normally that would be a ridiculous question, actually. He's the president. He ran on this issue. He has every right to be part of it. But even Republicans, which I don't disagree with all the policy of Pelosi and Schumer, but even the Republicans would tell you the problem with the president is he's so inconsistent. When he gets involved, sends things off the rails.
Yeah, that's why we had a government shutdown in the first place for 35 days, because there was a deal on the table that Democrats and Republicans supported, but the president decided at the last minute that he was not okay with that deal. So that's why these Democrats and Republicans who were sort of hanging out behind closed doors trying to hash out a deal, they realized that they can get something that they can both take to their parties and they can get support for and avoid a government shutdown. The big question is whether or not President Trump would sign on to that, and that is something that not only Democrats have no idea about, but even Republicans who talk to the president regularly do not know what his bottom line is, what he would ultimately decide if they come up with a deal. So that's a big challenge that Republicans are facing, not knowing the bottom line for the president and whether or not he would just either veto a bipartisan deal or just go ahead and sign a emergency declaration and do this without Congress.
And you learn, if you go through the speech, if you watch last night, or if you read the transcript of what animates the president. A couple lines on infrastructure, 3 pages on immigration. He did say, to the Democrats, let's work together on things like HIV/AIDS. Let's work together on things like childhood cancer. Democrats skeptical about the financial commitment to those issues, but he did have some olive branches to reach out on areas where there is bipartisan agreement. But then he also said, you want to get along, you want the economy to continue, essentially call off the investigative dogs.
An economic miracle is taking place in the United States, and the only thing that can stop it are foolish wars, politics, or ridiculous partisan investigations.
The Democrats would say constitutional congressional oversight.
Well, and he can say whatever he wants about that, but Democrats are moving forward with oversight starting today, and that's going to be his new reality. I think what he's trying to do there is essentially do the same thing to these congressional investigations that he's tried to do to the Mueller investigation, which is to try to undermine its credibility, try to make it look like it's nothing but politically motivated, so that no matter what comes out from this, he can hope that his supporters will just look at it as another Democratic witch hunt. But those investigations are going to go forward and are going to be a real central part of his presidency over the next 2 years.
I think the other thing he's trying to do there is set the table for the argument. He, if he's listening to his advisors, which he sometimes does, sometimes does not, but he obviously realizes that with the Democrats in control of the House, the likelihood of any big, substantial legislative accomplishments between now and the time that he's going back to voters and asking to be reelected is pretty low. And so he wants it out there as an idea that the reason that nothing got done, the reason that you're seeing, less accomplishments than I promised you would have is because they're busy investigating me. And he really wants to set up that opposition now so that the thought is in voters' minds when he has to go back and explain why there hasn't been more done in his first term.
It's going to be fascinating to watch the next week to 10 days here in Washington as the negotiations continue, and then see, will there be follow-up? The president has laid out some of these ideas to work together before. Hasn't been much follow-up. Most people think this is going to be more partisan to the campaign worker. We shall see. It's a fascinating speech. Up next for us, some breaking news in Virginia. The governor and lieutenant governor's problems weren't enough. Now the state's attorney general coming clean himself about a blackface incident in his past.